I had gotten involved in an organization called Center for Hospice Care about 17 years ago. Started out as a member of their personnel committee, and was asked to be on the board, and then served in the various board chairs along the way. And wound up, it was in 2007, we started our foundation. And it's technically called the Foundation for the Center for Hospice and Palliative Care Incorporated, which is a mouthful. So we just shortened it up to Hospice Foundation. And so that's our DBA. We're supporting Foundation for Center for Hospice Care, serving 8 counties in northern Indiana. And along the way, I was asked if I would actually leave what I was doing in the business world and come and run this organization as the Chief Operating Officer. And so it didn't take me but about 30 seconds of thinking through the logistics of, okay, now I got to get out of this business, I got to get out of that business, I got to do this, I got to do that. And I said, okay, I'll figure it out. Yes, I'll do it. I would love to do that. And so that's what I've been doing. Actually started in 2008. And we have grown a bit over the course of time. We're the, as I say, supporting foundation for Center for Hospice Care. And for me, that became and I'll just tell a quick story here. Yeah, I had mentioned before that as a boy, you know, our first teachers, of course, were our parents. And I remember I used to spend, my dad was the unit administrator for the Army National Guard in Elkhart, Indiana. And so every Saturday morning, interesting, we're here on Saturday morning, but every Saturday morning he and I would, and I say it's every, because, you know, as we get older and we think back to times, there may have been 1 or 2 times that something happened, and all of a sudden in your brain it's something that happened more frequently than that. But I know that my dad and I used to spend Saturday mornings together because he would go into the office and get caught up on paperwork. And so on non-drill weekends, we would go and spend the morning, and I'd kind of watch him work, and he'd set me up with a desk and give me all of his, you know, secret files and things that he was throwing away. And so we would spend Saturday mornings together. And I just remember those were, you know, kind of special times. It was the one and only time that it was just he and I being able to spend time together. And we'd leave and we'd stop at Judd Drug Store and sit at the counter and he'd have a cup of coffee and I'd get something to drink. And on our way out, we'd get these hot roasted peanuts. And it was just really it was a great bonding experience. So my father died actually when I was 9 years old. And so at that time, it was just my mom and me at that point, or very close to that point. My grandfather died in 1969 in June. My dad died in November. And then my grandmother died about 3-4 years later. Why that's significant is because we all lived together, and we were together in an extended family. So it was my dad and my mom and me living on the main floor. My brother and sister were already out. They were older. My brother's 14 years older. My sister's 19 years older than I am. And so they were out doing their thing. And then my grandparents lived upstairs, so we had this extended family and spent a lot of time together, obviously. So when that happened, I guess something happened in my brain that related to death and dying and helping people through that process, because I had experienced death at that age, at 9 years old. And I think that without consciously thinking about it, as time went on, and working through and being in the human resources profession, helping people deal with loss at times in losing their jobs through no fault of their own sometimes. Along the way, I began to have this yearning inside to do that kind of work, but do it in a way that it helped people who maybe had been in my situation as a kid, who wasn't really able to express the feelings, of loss, and not really sure what to do with that. And so what ended up happening is I've gotten involved with this hospice organization, and what we do is basically we help people through that process, the patients and their families. Our unit of care is not just that individual patient, that person who's dying, but it's all the people who surround them. And so for us, that focus is so important. And not really, and I think a lot of people don't have an understanding or a very good understanding of what hospice care is. And it's really caring for that whole unit of care, the patient and their family, or their loved ones, the people that support them. And so for Center for Hospice Care, in the work that we've been doing since 1980, we've served over 26,000 patients during that period of time. We also then care for the families. And so those families become part of our extended family. And as a result of that, we have a lot of people in our community who are very generous, who give back to us and who help us to care for other people along the way. So running a foundation that does those kinds of things for me is personally gratifying. And then we got involved with an organization called the Foundation for Hospices in Sub-Saharan Africa a few years ago. And so as a foundation, we began connecting with them, and they connected us to an organization called the Palliative Care Association of Uganda. And for us, doing something outside of our local area was very different. We didn't necessarily want the people in our local community to feel as if they are in some way supporting something outside the community that they don't, that they're not directly connected to. And so we made a conscious effort to get fundraising support from outside the community. So some of the fundraising that we're getting, or the funds that we're getting for the work of PCOO in Africa, is coming from outside the community. So that's been a very positive thing for us. And we've, along the way, produced a film called Okuyamba, the Lugandan word meaning to help. And I don't know if that was an accident or planned. It was not planned by us. Divine providence, I think, came up with the name Okuyamba, because that's what we were there to do, is to help, and that's what I'm about, is to try and help people. And we've come up with caring for patients who are dying out deep in the villages of Uganda is one thing, but then you see these children who are caregivers for their parents as they're dying. And they have very unique psychosocial, emotional, and spiritual needs that are a little bit different than a standard orphan, if you will. And I don't mean to make that sound in any way negative, but for children who've been the caregiver as their parents are dying, and then have had to become the person to be head of the family. And in some cases, there may be 6, 8, 10, 12 children that now are dependent upon the oldest child. And it's not always the oldest child. It might be the second or third child down, but it might be the person that the mother that they were caring for brought that daughter in, or that son, that they knew that they had the spirit in them that would be able to help the family persevere, and they would bring that person in, and that child in, and say, hey, you're the one. You need to, after I'm gone, you need to be the one to take the leadership role with the family. You need to make sure that the kids get their education and that they are fed. And I know that you can do that, and I'm entrusting that to you. So those kids have a very unique challenge not only immediately, but long-term. And so we started a program called the Road to Hope. And the Road to Hope Fund supports children, child caregivers, to get back into school and provides them with the food and clothing and shelter and the education and fees that are necessary for them to be able to get an education. But then it also provides ongoing follow-up support, bereavement support, if you will, by the palliative care workers who've been specially trained for this type of work. And right now we've only got 17 kids on the fund, but as we are looking at this thing growing, I anticipate that we'll have a lot more in the future. So that for me is probably one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done, because I feel like all the things that I've been doing in my life leading up to this point have prepared me to do what I'm doing in managing an operation, a hospice foundation that builds buildings for the local organization and raises money for the local organization and is kind of the face of the local organization in the community. But one of the most fulfilling parts of it is what we're doing for people who have no other means. If we weren't doing this, it wouldn't happen. And we can't do it alone. We do it in partnership with the Palliative Care Association of Uganda, and it's been a great relationship.
Have you made a connection between the powerlessness you felt when you were young in the situation you were with your dad, and how you're now going to empower people to not have to feel maybe what you went through? Mm-hmm. And so you have a kind of empathy for what that's like to watch a situation that is just so incredibly painful and you don't know what to do. And have you made that connection in your head between that?
Not till now.
Do you think there is a connection?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there is. Not sure I know how to articulate it, but so there have been times over the last few years that I've thought, and in fact, when I was asked to do this job that I'm doing today, which I don't view as a job, by the way, it's who I am, you know. I think of myself, and I always have kind of thought of myself as a 24/7 kind of guy. But it wasn't until I started doing what I'm doing now for a living that I really felt like everything I'm doing, personally and professionally, spiritually, all came together in a way that has enabled me to not think of what I do as work. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. It's who I am. And the sum total of all the things, all the experiences I had, the people I met over the years, the people I emulated, the people I saw that what they were doing wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. Through that process of elimination and addition, I became the person that I am, and all of those different experiences I had in teaching and in being a human resources professional, being a recruiter, being a cheerleader, being a coach, being an employee relations person, whatever all of that means, being a human resources professional, led me to being in my own business, doing those kinds of things within my business, and then taking people, let me rephrase that. All of those things really led to my ability, I guess I want to say, gave me the skill sets, gave me the experiences necessary to be able to make what I think are good decisions for our organization as we move forward. It's improved my judgment, having been in those previous experiences, having made my own mistakes along the way, and learning from those mistakes has put me in a position where I'm able to help this organization move forward. And really, in the end, it's not about the organization moving forward, it's about how many people can we help along the way. And the children, for me, working with children, and we have a program here locally in our community called Camp Evergreen, and Camp Evergreen is a grief camp for kids. And that's always been something that, for me, has been important. I'm working right now and trying to endow that program so that it never goes away. And we were willing to rename it for someone somewhere along the way. But we want to, we'd like to endow that so that we have that sense of permanency. And the same thing is true with what we're doing in Uganda. I would very much like to develop an endowment that would enable us to have a certain amount of money that gets thrown off every year in perpetuity to be able to take care of these kids who are extremely vulnerable, who are, for whom there really is no hope unless we can provide that and be able to put them on, as we say, the road to hope. So for me, if we can do that, then I will feel like I've fulfilled my calling, if you will, in life.